Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, December 30th, 2016, our last show of the fabulous year that 2016 has been. Wrapping it up for a Friday. Wow, what a year it's been, eh? Okay, well, at least everything's working today. Internet not holding us back yet. I anticipate, well, there could be some problems. We've had some difficulty around here in the last day or two, but so far so good. Thumbs up from Justice. Thanks so much, Justice, for being there in the morning each day, as you are all the time. You could not run this place without you. I appreciate you get up so early, you West Coaster, you. Thanks so much. Bill in Portland, Maine, who gets up with us East Coasters. And thank you for sending out your morning Twitter notice to everyone. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, reports that 2016 has been killed in a gun cleaning accident. And that's probably a fitting way, no better way of ending this year. Yeah, and I didn't mention to you, but I mentioned on Twitter, and I saw that Bill noticed it today too, an oddball of a gun fail story from out of Maine. And we'll see if we can't scoop that one up. But a guy who I guess is well known to you, Bill, because I saw your tweet about it, a retired columnist from the local paper. I'll dig up your tweet, just scroll back and grab yours and let everybody know about that one. The local opinion columnist, I guess, is the best thing you can say about the guy who wrote for one of the papers up your way. Died in a gun accident just recently, and it was one of the dumber, ways to go. A guy, I guess he was a gun collector. He was a big gun rights defender in his column, which is sort of a kind way of putting it. He was a bit of a gun nut, and so in some ways, oddly fitting, I guess, that he died as he lived, I guess, showing a house guest and his 16-year-old son. We don't know under what circumstances they had been invited to the home, but, it's the holidays. And what tops the holidays better than saying, hey, let me show you all the different things I keep in house to kill people with, and starting with the guns. And he handed over, apparently, Mr. Gun Safety. Bill says he wasn't retired. He was described in the first couple articles that I had seen as retired, but they said he continued to write. I don't know what retired means to people who say things like that. Yeah, he was retired, but he was still working. I don't know. Well, okay, he was working less. I mean, he was lazy. No, he was old. Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it, but okay. He still ran a column every Friday. Nasty guy, as Bill says. He spread fake news all the time. And I did notice that in addition to his interest in Second Amendment issues, if you want to put it nicely, he was also not a particularly tolerant man. I guess... I did read, somebody posted actually, I think it must have been Jen Hayden over at Daily Coast, posted a story about this story, and that he was a bit of an anti-gay bigot, you could say, but he also wrote a couple of columns on the subject of guns and Second Amendment rights, and the one that struck me, I think somebody grabbed a 2013 article of his, so it's it's not way back when. We say he was retired. He was A, actively still writing, and B, up to about a year or two ago, he was still writing this stuff about the Second Amendment. I believe the Maine legislature had before it a bill that would have expanded background checks in the state for gun sales, and would have required that gun sales all be run through a federally licensed firearms dealer, so that you could still do private sales of firearms, but in order to officially complete the sale and be in compliance with state law, you had to register the sale with in the federal firearms, whatever the database is, and a licensed dealer would have to do that for you. It's just a matter of paperwork. And I think he took this bill up and in opposing it, wrote hyperbolic crap like, so much for the right to bear arms in this country. Like, okay, he had to do a little bit of extra paperwork. It's not exactly the same thing as gun grabbing, so just calm down, but not this guy. Anyway, he was from Sanford, Maine. I have I've got the article I read originally, handy anyway. And one more comment that Bill was saying, he was on the editorial board, and it was the editorial board that he retired from, but I guess he kept on writing his own opinion columns. Anyway, the basics of it I read in the Portland Press Herald, and I guess now that we have the article in front of us, we can mention the man's name. M.D. Harmon. He's not a doctor. His initials were M and D, and I have no idea why he went by that. Unless I wonder what was his real name? Does it say? Anyway, Michael Harmon. Why M.D. Harmon? I have no idea why he would go by that. Michael D. Harmon seems like a perfectly respectable name. If it was Millipede Dung Harmon, I'd go by M.D. But Michael seems respectable enough, I think. Anyway, there's a picture of his charming little house here, snow-covered, etc. And I don't know if the cars in the driveway belong to the kid who shot him or who. But anyway, he was 71 years old, died at home. I'm sure that a conservative like that would have said that's how he wanted to go, except for the part about being shot, about the 16-year-old to whom he handed a loaded gun. Just another example, one more in the parade that is gun fail of how these guys who keep preaching about gun safety, as long as you just follow the basic cardinal rules of gun safety, guns are perfectly safe to own and could be kept anywhere, and there's really no reason not to have, armed teachers or whatever he might have argued in favor of. But again, it just takes one slip up, and handing a loaded pistol to a 16-year-old, to anyone, is a problem. And whenever I read the sanctimonious preachings of gun safety or gun advocates, gun rights advocates talking about how safe they are, or watching their videos about gun range protocol, handing a loaded weapon to anybody is a no-no. And if you're really, actually careful and actually practice the gun safety rules that they preach, you won't be handing anything to anybody. You would, if you had a gun in your hand and you wanted that gun to be in someone else's hands, apparently what you're supposed to do is, 1, unload it, 2, visually inspect the whole thing in front of the other guy, if at all possible, including, for semi-automatic weapons, opening the chamber, or any weapon, but say a revolver you would have to check differently, but opening the slide and looking in the chamber to make sure that there isn't a round seated in the chamber, even though the magazine is out, etc., etc. And then, with the chamber open, preferably, you would then put the damn thing down and let the other person be responsible for picking it up. So there's a clear transfer of control here, and agency. But okay, people don't do that. They might hand it to one another. But upon receiving it, apparently the protocol is for that person, if you're really sticking strictly by the rules, and why wouldn't you if it could kill you when you don't, you're supposed to pick up the gun, and of course, again, with the muzzle pointed away from anything that would be a real problem if you put a hole in it. You visually inspect the gun again. Now that it's under your control, you likewise make sure that it is unloaded, that there is no magazine seated, that there is no bullet in the chamber, no round in the chamber. Oh, I almost got disqualified from the gun debate by saying bullet instead of round or cartridge. Well, anyway, all of this stuff, rather remarkable that it could be violated, and instead handing a 16-year-old who apparently wasn't particularly adept at handling firearms, handed it over to him and didn't tell him, hey, by the way, one of the things you might want to not do while you're taking a look at my gun. And whatever happened to, by the way, can I see your gun? See with your eyes, not with your hands. That's gone by the wayside. Here, take a gun. But one of the things you're not going to want to do while you hold it is pull the trigger. Well, I just want to see what it would feel like if I put my finger on the trigger and pulled. Well, that is a thing that you can do at a firing range or outdoors or whatever. You can even do it without any ammunition in the gun and dry fire it. I can arrange that for you, but apparently we're not at that stage. And even so, one of the places I would prefer that you not point it is at me when you do that. It doesn't say, maybe it does. I don't know whether it discusses where he was shot besides at home. I mean, where on your body. Show me on the doll where the 16-year-old shot you, sir. But that would be a place you would not want a handgun pointing when a 16-year-old says, I would like, can I please, for perhaps the first time in my life, pull the trigger on a pistol. Now would be an inappropriate time to do that because, for one thing, I haven't actually checked whether it, blam. I don't know. I got no idea how that could possibly have happened with a lifelong gun advocate, except that the truth is that most people who are gun rights advocates become pretty complacent about their own skill in handling things, and they forget, and then they end up getting killed. Not all of them, obviously, only a small percentage of them, but it's particularly ironic when it happens to someone like this. As a matter of fact, I will save it for after the show here. Bill says he's got a comment in Jen's diary if I want to read it after the show. I wonder if is it unsuitable for the show, or should we just move on? Maybe that's the best remedy in all this. Anyway, I found it rather interesting that it had happened yet again, and I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, by the way, speaking of crazy gun fail stories, I if I recall correctly, and that's always a gamble, I think I had to end up putting another piece in pocket on that crazy story out of Michigan where there it is, where the school resource officer accidentally, I guess, fired his gun in school and shot through a wall and hit a teacher in the neck. You remember this story? And that luckily the teacher was only grazed, and so minor injury, and is fine and still, working and everything. I was surprised by the whole thing. Shooting through a school wall. Where I come from, shooting through a school wall is a pretty major deal because almost all the schools around here, the walls are cinder block. I don't really know why that is, but maybe it's a fire thing. I don't know. Anyway, this school just had plain old drywall, so it was pretty easy to shoot through. And if you remember this story, this was a cop who somehow found himself in the robotics lab in this high school, and I remember laughing at this story when we were reading because it was so nuts that I had wondered whether he said, oh, look, a robotics lab. I wonder if I could give my gun to a robot. Would the robot be able to fire it? And then it turns out that's basically what he did, that there was a force machine of some kind. I don't really know what that's even supposed to be, but I guess it's supposed to measure the amount of force you're putting on. Yeah, well, not usually the trigger of a gun, but I guess you certainly can do it. Anyway, there's just more detail on this idiotic situation. This one's datelined Kagro, Michigan, although I think previously we had datelined this Bay City. But anyway, a decision is expected to come down this week on whether or not Bay County Sheriff's deputy, the deputy who fired his pistol in a classroom, will face criminal charges. He should certainly be, battered about the head and neck for this. Tuscola County prosecutor. Now, what happened is he's a Bay County Sheriff's deputy, but he's under the jurisdiction of Tuscola. Have I pronounced that one wrong? County prosecutor. I don't really know why. Don't ask. I couldn't tell you. Mark Reen is the guy's name. He's conducting a press conference at 3 p.m. on Thursday. That would have been yesterday, so we missed it. At that time, Reen is expected to provide information regarding his office's findings on the investigation of Deputy Adam J. Brown, who fired a handgun inside the Bay City Western High School and Middle School building at, in case you're interested in visiting, the Shrine, 500 West Midland Road, last month. Okay, so it was Bay City, and Kagro may be the county seat. But which county? Bay County? Tuscola County, I guess. All right. And tell me, is it Tuscola by any chance? Who knows? I did learn the other day via email and Twitter from a couple of folks about the pronunciation of, what was it? Was that another Michigan town, or was it Ohio? Watervliet? Remember that one? I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it. Watervliet, but it was Watervliet is what people are telling me. So just by way of updating that pronunciation guide, if you're keeping a running total, if you're that kind of guy, please make note. Anyway, following a Michigan State Police investigation, the report was filed with the Bay County Prosecutor's Office. Okay. Still not figuring out the Tuscola thing here. Oh, maybe there's some in here. To avoid any there we are. To avoid any conflict or appearance of impropriety, staff in Bay County requested a special prosecutor. All right, well, good explanation. I like that one. State Attorney General Bill Schuette, right? Isn't that the way you pronounce his name? I think I remember that from Rosalind's update. Schuette, how perfectly appropriate. Anyway, on November 29th, Mr. Schuette, and I don't mean the deputy here, I mean the Attorney General, signed an order granting the request, appointing the Tuscola County Prosecutor's Office to the task of determining whether charges are warranted. Is that a county next door or across the state? I wonder. Michiganders can tell me. If it's good for the Michiganders, I'll ask that you please tell the Michigese. I think I've put that one backwards. Police reports obtained by MLive / the Bay City Times via a Freedom of Information Act request state that Brown, the school's resource officer, at about 12:30 p.m. on Friday, November 11th, was in the school's robotics classroom with another teacher. See, he was empowered by the news of the Trump election to do this. Hooray, Donald Trump has been elected. Now we can finally find out whether robots can fire guns. Apparently this was a big point of oppression for this guy. Anyway, he was in the school's robotics classroom with another teacher. They used a force machine. He's with another teacher. They used the force machine. That's right. This is what's so interesting. To test the trigger pull of Brown's personal Springfield EMP 9mm handgun. So before we get too excited, this gun is not loaded. He goes in, he's with a teacher, and he says, hey, I'd like to use your force machine to test out how many pounds of pressure do I need to pull the trigger on my personal Springfield EMP 9mm handgun. Red Ryder, bolt action, BB, whatever it is. Anyway, was it a pump action, the Red Ryder? I don't know. So they used the force machine, but they made sure, obviously, the first time anyway, that the gun was unloaded, which would, technically would render it safe. However, again, in a situation like this, I'd be like, well, is there really any need to do this? And shouldn't we be doing this? Perhaps we should be doing this at a gun range or someplace where it would be possible to, if something goes wrong and the bullet fires, what direction are we pointed in? No, they don't give any attention to this. But at least they checked to see whether the gun was not loaded or not. Thank you. Bill is producing in the background. Tuscola County is just southeast of Bay County, so it's nearby. And here's your trivia for the day. Bill lived in Bay City for 7 years before I managed to tunnel out to Maine with a spoon, which tells us a little bit about the loamy soils of the Bay County area, unless he's kidding about the spoon thing. But we'll put a different producer on that one, fact-checking Bill on whether or not he really used the spoon to dig that tunnel all the way to Maine. But thank you, Bill. So, what goes wrong? Nothing goes wrong when he's with the teacher. It takes a teacher, ladies and gentlemen, to instruct the school resource officer properly to unload their weapon before the proper protocol, you see, Mr. Police Officer, before you take your gun and put it in the hands of a robot and fire it at the wall is unload it. Okay, so they test this 9mm gun. No word on the results. I do not know how much force was necessary to pull the trigger on Adam J. Brown's personal Springfield EMP 9mm handgun. But the two left the room, the pair left the room without incident, only for, this is where it gets hairy, Brown to return alone and use the machine to test the trigger pull on his .38 caliber Sig Sauer, another personal handgun that he brought into the school. How many things are wrong right here with this thing? He comes back without the teacher whose classroom it is. He decides, I'm just going to use the force machine. use the force machine to test the trigger pull on yet another personal handgun, which I happen to have around. How many guns is this guy carrying? Man, I don't know. I'm sure that law enforcement officers could give a good explanation as to why it must be allowed to let other officers, or let themselves or other officers, carry their own personal weapons while on duty also. But really, I don't know. Maybe they need to take a second look at that. And there have been a couple of stories lately about cops with their own personal sort of backup weapons getting into gun fail situations. And was it Fresno, California, that a police officer was recently killed when he was, again, showing a friend of his, a colleague, you want to see my personal backup weapon? Here it is. Hands it over to him, accidentally fires the thing and kills the cop. I mean, it's not just weirdo columnists that make this mistake. Anyway, so for whatever reason, he decides, I got to test all the personal handguns to which I have access right now, and I got to do it without the teacher. I don't care if the teacher's around or not. I saw how this force machine worked. I'll do it myself. And then, in all the excitement to test the trigger pull of the .38 caliber Sig Sauer, because what are you going to do with that information? I don't know. They don't even provide the answer. Does he even know? Did he keep track of how much force it takes to pull the trigger? Apparently, it was super important to him then. I don't know why it's not important to us now. File a Freedom of Information Act request on that one. But, which, by the way, in all likelihood, you could probably go to the website of the manufacturer and just find out what the answer is. But he wanted to see whether his was properly calibrated, I guess. And so there you have it. He put his .38 caliber, they refer to it as a .38 caliber Sig Sauer, which ordinarily, I wonder whether this is protocol or not either, by the way. Just for those of you playing along at home with the gun fail thing, when I have seen people refer to a .38 caliber, it just exactly that way, in other words, .38, that typically refers to a revolver style or can you say non-semi-automatic? Semi-automatic pistols of the same, that use ammunition of the same size, for whatever reason, tend to be referred to with an additional digit, a .380 or a 380. It's the same caliber, but for whatever reason, I've noticed the people who write about guns in the papers, anyway, not to say that they're the experts. Does anybody know offhand? Here's another job for the background producers. Whether adding the additional 0 is supposed to be in some way indicative of a semi-automatic pistol. And Sig Sauer, I don't know whether they make revolvers or not, but certainly they're more famous for the semi-automatics. Anyway, so he wanted to know what the trigger pull on this Sig Sauer was, and guess what? The paper goes on to report the gun was not empty of bullets. That's an interesting construction there too. I mean, is that sort of the stab at the passive voice construction that we often hear? That the gun went off or the gun got fired somehow. The gun was not empty of bullets. The gun was loaded, you mean? I think that's supposed to mean he took the magazine out, but he didn't check the chamber, and there was a round in the chamber. So that's not loaded per se, but it isn't empty of bullets either. It's a lot of gray area with semi-automatic pistols, I guess. Somehow, with these guys. They're black and white about everything else, though. Anyway, so, okay, guess what? The gun was not empty of bullets, and the experiment, this is interesting too, the experiment caused the gun to fire around through 2 pieces of drywall. And again, alright, well, there's the passive voice problem, right? The experiment, or at least the agency here is not claimed, the experiment caused the gun to fire. Well, who was running the experiment? It's Adam J. Brown, right? Bad experiment. And even when the teacher ran the experiment prior, at least they checked the gun and it wasn't loaded, or it was empty of bullets in their preferred construction. Bad idea, though. But anyway, here the experiment caused the gun to fire. So we're not sure whether we should fire the deputy. He didn't make it, fire. It was the experiment that did it. Anyway, so then, of course, the last part of it there, that it caused the gun to fire around through 2 pieces of drywall. So you might, if you didn't know the story already, you might think, what was that supposed to be? Like they put 2 pieces of drywall in front of the gun to stop the bullet in case anything came out because they weren't sure whether it was loaded? What were 2 pieces of drywall doing in the robotics lab? Well, the 2 pieces of drywall are the wall of the robotics lab and the wall of the classroom on the other side. What they're saying here is they fired the bullet through the wall of the robotics classroom and into the next classroom. We already know this, but I mean, imagine you're reading this thing, 2 pieces of drywall. And I'm, again, trying everything they can do here to disguise the fact that this idiot put the gun in a robot hand and fired it through the wall and hit a teacher in the next room. The projectile, it's a bullet, entered a classroom. Yes, who is it? It's projectile. You may enter. Thank you. Hello, I'm a bullet. Give me your neck. What? The projectile entered a classroom containing about 30 students. He fired into a full classroom. Okay? The bullet then traveled toward the ceiling. Ooh, here I go. I'm traveling to the ceiling. Scraped the tile. Ouch, says the tile. Proceeded to hit a cement wall. Now, those are the walls I remember in school. Ricocheted off it, careened across the room, and struck a teacher, Brenda Amthor, in the neck. There's no punctuation in that, by the way. There is earlier in the sentence, but careened across the room, comma, and struck a teacher, Brenda Amthor, in the neck. Not a teacher, comma, Brenda Amthor, comma. They eliminated those commas. So, well, sorry what happened to you there, Brenda. By the way, no comment from Brenda in any of this. Brenda, can I ask you a couple questions? What do you think about experiments that cause bullets to pass through 2 random pieces of drywall and then seemingly giving license to the projectile to enter a classroom containing about 30 students and 1 teacher? I mean, no comment on all this, I guess. But anyway, Amthor was sitting at her desk when struck by the bullet. She was uninjured apart from a small scratch, police reports state. She was injured. Okay. She was uninjured except for the bullet through her heart, But otherwise, Mrs. Lincoln. Though Brown was engaged in conversations with the school, this is where it got really crazy, right? Brown, the deputy, was engaged in conversations with the school staff on the projectile's origin. And it's not that this guy doesn't have a vocabulary, whoever wrote this. Who? Cole Waterman. See me after class, Cole. he's bending over backwards not to. I mean, I guess because it's going to be a criminal case, he's trying to be. Is one excuse for being super careful. The other, of course, would be making excuses for gun nuts. But okay. Though Brown was engaged in conversations with the school's staff on the projectile's origin, he did not admit to having fired a gun, reports indicate. It wasn't me, it was the experiment. The force machine did it, but not even the force machine did it, the experiment did it. As a result, the school was placed in secure mode, that's lockdown, while administrators attempted to discern what had happened. Well, with all the strange construction of sentences and weird syntax people are using, I guess it was very difficult to discern what had happened. School staff gave Brown the bullet to hold. Remember this? But then he tossed it in a grassy area covered by leaves, according to police reports. A canine unit recovered the bullet. During this incident, Adam did not initially confess to discharging his weapon, wrote Detective Sergeant William Arndt. He confessed after being confronted by school administrators. Adam also admitted that he attempted to destroy evidence when school administrators gave him the fired bullet to protect. Adam left the school building, placing the fired gun in his personal vehicle, and threw the fired bullet into the school lawn in an attempt to thwart the investigation. Good job, by the way. You didn't bury it or anything. You say, I got to go make a 7-Eleven run and dump it there. Nothing. Arndt spoke with Brown, who was, quote, extremely emotional, and explained that he had been in contact with his union representative, who had advised him not to provide a statement. He did say it was a total accident. By the way, how do you like that? First of all, the union rep thing. Wow. Again, the cops with their union reps. As soon as the cops do something wrong, it's right to the union rep and never to, oh my God, is everybody okay? Do we need medical assistance here? Or just simply taking responsibility for something. They call the union rep. The union rep, of course, tells them, don't say anything. And then when he does say something, it was a total accident. I was minding my own business, patrolling the school, looking for ninjas or terrorists who might be lurking in the halls without a pass. And I tripped, and I fell all the way to my car, where I got my second personal gun, which fell into my pocket, and I was still bouncing from the fall. And then, bam, I ricocheted back into the robotics lab without the teacher. And then, as I was dusting myself off, I sneezed, and my second gun fell out of my pocket into the force machine, and then decided to conduct an experiment. And it was the experiment that accidentally caused the gun to fire into the drywall. After the drywall, I don't know what happened. In fact, I'm not even sure. As a matter of fact, my lawyer advises me I will only testify to having shot through one piece of drywall. I don't know what happened after the bullet entered the piece of drywall that I witnessed. After that, you're going to have to talk to the bullet. I really don't know. Brown is currently on administrative duties with the sheriff's office, by the way. He's not fired or suspended. He's simply doing desk work. Deputy Seung Lee has replaced Brown as Western School Resource Officer, Cunningham said. Brown had been on the force since, you might guess what, July, August? No, 1996 is the answer. So the fact that he made it this far without accidentally firing anything or walking into, say, the orchestra room and saying, I wonder if a cello can throw a ninja star, or I wonder if it would be a good idea to bring a hand grenade into the gym and see if bouncing a basketball off of it can set it off. Can you pull the pin by, yeah, all right. Well, anyway, that's 1996. That's a good record. 20 years before he finally decided to answer the can a robot fire a gun question. So I credit him for his patience on that score. That is some story. I can't get enough of that one, but you probably can. So why don't we move on to something different? What's up this morning? Let's see. Well, first of all, as you will no doubt have noticed, Greg Dworkin, once again, not with us on this Friday, but we can, of course, always turn to the abbreviated pundit roundup, even when he doesn't produce the roundup for the morning. It's Georgia's work this morning. Georgia Logothetis has put together this one, and you know how she does it. She puts all the headlines in that one mashup right up at the top. Her title today, Abbreviated Pundit Roundup, Obama's Sanctions on Russia Box Trump In. What do you all think of that one, by the way? Not that headline, but the play. I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, this is quite a brilliant thing. We'll have to catch you up on what the news is here. Of course, we're talking about the announced sanctions against Russia in retaliation for their, I guess we still say, alleged hacking during the last election. It's difficult to, I still think you want to be careful in saying something like they hacked the election. On Twitter, I'll say it because of the character count, but they're hacking during the election, which, okay, we all know what the aim appears to have been. So the sanctions that were put in place, were they sufficient? I don't know. The administration says there's perhaps more to come, that this does not necessarily represent, I believe he said, the sum total of what we're doing. Here are the headlines that she includes in her mashup. President Obama punishes Russia at last. There's another that says, how Trump made Russia's hacking more effective. That's a good, interesting one there. I don't know which one which papers these are from, but maybe she identifies them in her roundup here. Come to think of it, I don't know if I've ever done anything more than scroll by the headlines on one of these, unless Greg is walking us through it. I'm not used to her usual methodology. Conway wonders if Russian sanctions were intended to restrict Trump. Trump ally, who says Obama's new Russia sanctions are, quote, kind of stupid. And Trump has tough choice after Obama sanctions on Russia hack. So I think that last one kind of gets to the idea that I've seen bandied about, that the sanctions are quite brilliant in that it forces, should Trump, in showing favoritism to his Russian friends, decide to reverse the sanctions, because it is, after all, December 30th, and by January 20th, of course, Donald Trump is expected to be inaugurated as president. He can, of course, reverse the sanctions. So is it really worth doing? Will it really be effective? Can't Putin just wait it out? And people were pointing out that, given what the sanctions were, and I know that they included, at any rate, I don't know if they're we'll have to read a little bit about what the full list is, but they included the expulsion from the United States of some 35 Russian nationals, some of whom are diplomats and others of whom are, I guess, a little more nebulous what their roles are. But an interesting move in that apparently people thought, well, okay, if Trump were to reverse the sanctions, that would essentially mean inviting these 35 expelled Russian nationals back into the country in order to reverse the sanctions. And that would be a bit obvious even for Donald Trump. And so the thought was, well, now he's been boxed in, and it's on him to invite a bunch of spies and hackers back into the country, which he would do in the full view of the American public. And if he wants to reverse the sanctions, fine, let him set himself up for a hanging here. But one, I'm not so certain that they care to reverse the sanctions. Two, I'm not so certain that he would be that worried about it. But I mean, it's a good thought that he'd be boxed in. It's a good initial guess about this. I just don't know. With this guy, hardly any of the rules actually ever apply. Anyway, let's take a look at the roundup here, and then maybe that'll point us to some of the best sources for discussing the sanctions themselves. Georgia says we begin today's roundup with the New York Times and its editorial in support of the new sanctions against Russia, which reads, while it is definitely too late and may also be too little, there should be no doubt about the correctness of President Obama's decision to retaliate against Russia for hacking American computers and trying to influence the 2016 presidential election. It would have been irresponsible for him to leave office next month and allow President Vladimir Putin to think that he's not going to be our next president. He's just still the president of Russia, in case you're groggy. To allow President Vladimir Putin to think that he could, with impunity, try to undermine American democracy. That would have been a particularly dangerous legacy given President-elect Donald Trump's alarming affinity for Mr. Putin and stubborn refusal to accept the conclusion of American intelligence agencies that Russia's cyber attacks were aimed at helping him and hurting Hillary Clinton. The president-elect told reporters dismissively before Mr. Obama's decision was announced that Americans should, quote, get on with our lives and forget about the hacking scandal. So much for that wishful thought. Now, in the Washington Post, they detail Trump's response, such as it is. Let's see. President-elect Donald Trump on Thursday played down the ramifications of any Russian interference in the U.S. election, saying it is time for the country to move on to bigger and better things. What's bigger and better than figuring this out? I don't know. But that's the statement, issued just hours after President Obama announced sweeping sanctions against Moscow. It was a pretty pathetic and pointless statement without any detail about anything, but okay. And if you read the statement, it's rather brief and stupid. This guy, though, yesterday was insisting he's going to write his own inaugural address, so good. Trump, who has for weeks voiced skepticism about Russia's role in the hacking of Democratic email accounts and other hostile actions, said he would seek to learn more about the situation next week, which was another amazing thing. I'll make time. Maybe I'll ask for a security briefing next week. Of course, you, as president, or even as president-elect, you can get a security briefing at the drop of a hat. It's just that Trump doesn't wear hats, so I guess he's going to wait until next week. Well, yes, he does. What am I saying? Doesn't wear hats. He's now most famous for wearing. Prior to this, he just didn't, because he wanted everybody to see his fabulous hair. But now he is famous for wearing hats. So he could drop one of those hats, which I assume he considers to be blasphemy at this point, and get a. So he's waiting for the new hat, his dropping hat, to arrive in the mail. Anyway, Trump's posture put him at odds with the Republican congressional leaders who have condemned Russia for its actions, with some suggesting tougher measures than what Obama detailed Thursday afternoon. The president's retaliation included the removal of 35 Russian government officials and sanctions against state agencies and individuals tied to the hacks. Now, there have been members of Congress who are siding with Trump here and say that the sanctions are actually pretty stupid. Trent Franks, congressman from Arizona, went so far as to say that the hacking, if it happened, was a public service anyway, because it revealed all the shenanigans going on inside the Democratic Party and behind the scenes in the Hillary Clinton campaign. So anybody, I guess, if you're thinking of hacking Trent Franks and his account, you should just know, so long as the information you reveal is true and accurate, you'll be doing everyone a public service. So just, I guess, you're supposed to go ahead and hack him, but I think you'll get yourselves in trouble. Just I'm not a practicing attorney. I can't advise you on this. I'm just saying, as a practical matter, why invite trouble? You see? All right. Well, let's see. There's more here from Georgia, and it's all about the hacking and the sanctions, and might as well get it in there as background. She decided that David Frum was worth a quote on this one, since he is tearing into Trump on Russia. It's all just an attempt to delegitimize Donald Trump. That's the argument you hear from Trump's supporters each time new information comes to light about how hard Russian spy services work to damage Hillary Clinton. You heard it again on Thursday. The Trump supporters are 100% right. The information is delegitimizing. The President-elect of the United States reportedly owes his office in considerable part to illegal clandestine activities in his favor conducted by a hostile foreign spy service. Trump doesn't believe it's hostile, but okay. It's hard to imagine a crisis of presidential legitimacy more extreme than that. But there's no argument against airing this information. It's precisely why the information must be aired. Without Trump's own willingness to make false claims and misuse Russian-provided information, the WikiLeaks material would have deflated of its own boringness. The Russian-hacked material did damage because and only because Russia found a willing accomplice in the person of Donald J. Trump. That is an actually interesting and valid point. I mean, the information that they hacked out really needed someone who would be willing to hype it in ways that, with interpretations that just really don't spring from what we actually learned. There's a key element of the ability to use and willingness to use fake news angles on this stuff that made it powerful material. Otherwise, it's pretty boring junk. I mean, do you want to eat pizza? That's kind of boring. How about if we tell everybody that do you want to eat pizza is code for do you want to go to a secret underground pedophilia club? Okay, well, that'll make it a juicier detail. Anyway, let's just run with that, and then you get Pizzagate. And of course, Georgia continues, no Trump response would be complete without an absurd take from Kellyanne Conway, this one via CNN. I will tell you that even those who are sympathetic to President Obama on most issues are saying that part of the reason he did this today was to, quote, box in President-elect Trump, Conway told CNN's Kate Bolduan on Out Front. That would be very unfortunate if politics were the motivating factor here. We can't help but think that's often true. She added, that is not the way that peaceful exchanges work in this democracy. Moreover, the Trump confidant, the Trump confidant, I see, there we are, painted the focus on Russia's potential involvement in the Democratic Party hacking as something of a distraction. All we heard through the election was Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia. Conway said, since the election, it's just this fever pitch of accusations and insinuations. Well, it's because we're getting ready to inaugurate a puppet. So it's a little worrying. And of course, some other Trump ally responses are just as absurd. Haler Miller, which is an absurd name, at the Huffington Post, oh, sorry, Haler, reports on this Trent Franks position. Here we are. Haler, I don't know why, I guess I thought maybe Haler Miller was the next Trump ally, and so I initially said, oh, what a ridiculous name. And now I realize that's not the ally. Okay, well, it was a ridiculous off-the-cuff thing anyway. But Haler Miller, that is I would have stayed away from that combination, to be honest, but what can you do? You'll get over it, Haler. Anyway, if it were up to us, if it were up to Trent Franks, if it were up to us, I'd say Trent Franks is out of here, but it's not. Trent Franks, the media would rather, I guess, that they start taking its cues from the Russian hackers. Wow. The Republican congressman appeared on MSNBC with Haley Jackson, whose name should be Haley Maley, to go along with Haler Miller. I'm sorry, Haler. I've never seen Haler as a name before, but okay, maybe it's an old family name. I don't know. The Republican congressman appeared on MSNBC with Haley Jackson on Thursday to deny that Russia hacked into the U.S. government servers, any U.S. government servers, in an attempt to tip the election for Donald Trump, despite the fact that both the FBI and CIA agree it happened. He says, there's no suggestion that Russia hacked into our voting systems or anything like that. Franks said Thursday, if Russia succeeded in giving the American people information that was accurate, then they merely did what the media should have done. Of course, you're not supposed to get your information that way. You're supposed to ask people questions or file Freedom of Information Act requests, I guess, and then discuss the information you get. Not simply steal the stuff, but okay. They didn't steal it. They just listened to somebody who did. Let's see. The Daily Beast has an entry here, and this one, Jackie Kucinich and Noah Shachtman here. Many congressional Republicans quickly issued backhanded compliments to the outgoing administration, saying the measures were appropriate, but too little too late. Trump, for his part, issued a statement that was a little more than an eye roll. The fuller version of his statement there, it's time for our country to move on to bigger and better things. Nevertheless, in the interest of our country and its great people, it's very Sarah Palin-ish there, I will meet with leaders of the intelligence community next week in order to be updated on the facts of this situation. I mean, that is a pretty garbage statement, but okay. Well, one of his earliest supporters in Congress, Representative Duncan Hunter of California, went even further. In a brief interview with the Daily Beast, he repeatedly called the sanctions silly, stupid, and dumb. 3 great words. For the president to invoke sanctions that can be reversed with the stroke of a pen by Trump on day one, I think it's pretty stupid, Hunter said. But then, there are some Republicans who look to be a thorn in Trump's side. Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham, two hawks on U.S. policy toward Russia, said they will lead the push in the upcoming Congress for sanctions on Moscow that are stronger than those the Obama administration announced Thursday. The retaliatory measures announced by the Obama administration today are long overdue, but ultimately they are a small price for Russia to pay for its brazen attacks on American democracy. We intend to lead the effort in the new Congress to impose stronger sanctions on Russia, the senator said in a joint statement Thursday. On final note, Nick Wadhams and Justin Sink at Bloomberg analyzed Trump's position in the aftermath of the sanctions. President Barack Obama is forcing his successor, Donald Trump, into a difficult choice. Reverse the sanctions the departing president just imposed on Russia for hacking emails in the U.S. election, or put at risk his campaign vow to improve relations with Vladimir Putin. While the sanctions and expulsions imposed by executive order can be undone with the stroke of a pen, first of all, Donald Trump has to figure out how to work a pen. But anyway, Trump may find it politically difficult to do so as key Republicans in Congress expressed support for Obama's move. I don't know how difficult he'll really find it, but okay. U.S. intelligence agencies also issued a report Thursday on their evidence that Russia was behind the hacking that produced a stream of leaks damaging his campaign opponent, Hillary Clinton. This likely will box in the Trump administration, if not legally, then certainly politically, because it's going to be hard for the administration to come in and say on day one, all the reports were untrue, the FBI was wrong, the CIA was wrong, said Eric Lorber, a senior advisor at the Center on Sanctions and Illicit Finance, I didn't realize there was such a center, at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Likewise, no idea that there was such a foundation. But okay. You can get a job anywhere in this town, I guess. How come I can't? Anyway, it will be difficult for the incoming administration to make that argument to the American people and say the sanctions should be completely done away with. Again, in normal circumstances, sure. I don't doubt Trump's intention to just try it anyway. I could absolutely just see him saying, I'm undoing it. And then people will say, but aren't you boxed in politically? Don't you find it difficult to make the argument to the American people that the sanctions should be completely done away with? No. Yeah. But it's unprecedented. Yeah. What about it? Well, you shouldn't. I mean, after that, we're all just left stammering, and then what? I have this similar comment here. I just grabbed this one. I don't even know if I remember this guy or not, but I see his tweets traded fairly frequently. John Schindler. We don't want to get on his list, or do we? I mean, if he's like the other Schindler, I guess you want to be on that list. But you don't want to be put in the position of being on a Schindler's list, period, right? Let's leave that aside. Okay, anyway, he's an official, verified guy and everything on Twitter. He is a national security columnist at The Observer, security consultant, author, provocateur, I'm sure also dad, probably Christian, and all the other things. But that's not all in here. But he mentions the cats in here, just in case you thought he wasn't conforming to the Twitter norms. Anyway, he just commented, if Trump lets 3 PNG'd Russian spies, PNG'd is funny because they were hackers. I'm like, pinged? No, oh, persona non grata. Okay, that's probably it. If Trump lets 35 PNG'd Russian spies back into the USA, the IC, intelligence community, will have a complete meltdown, unprecedented. He says this in response, by the way, to a Gary Kasparov tweet, which said, if Putin doesn't retaliate in kind as he would normally do by expelling Americans, it means he's counting on Trump to fix it all for him. All of which could be true. And I don't even doubt the IC would have a complete meltdown were the 35 persona non grata Russian spies let back into the U.S. But so what? So what? I mean, he seems perfectly willing to risk that meltdown. He doesn't appear to want them around or need them, and I mean, he does need them, but he doesn't want anyone to think he needs them. And to him, that's as important as anything. It must look like I don't need them, and I don't want to hear from him anyway, and I got my own guys. So I'm not convinced that he's not going to allow them back in. I'm not convinced that they aren't right now living in Trump Tower. Some of them. Seriously. I think we might even find that out to be the case. I mean, you wouldn't think so, but let me grab you this one. I saw this one from, and again, we've been at this site before, lawnews.com. Although, again, I'm not entirely sure how highly I regard their sourcing on all these things. They're just interesting. I haven't seen anything to prove to me that I need to worry about them in the fake news column. But it's not mainstream publishing. I can tell you that. Anyway, pardon. This is a piece written by Ron with 2 N's, Blitzer, not the no relation to the reindeer, as far as I know, although it is the Christmas season. 2 Russians on Obama's sanctions list were on the FBI's most wanted list. Well, okay, right? They've just been expelled as spies, so maybe that's a reasonable thing, right? You might expect them to be on the FBI's most wanted list. But I'm thinking about this. What does this mean in terms of getting these sanctions handled correctly? I'll read you the beginning of the article at least. On Thursday, President Barack Obama announced that he is taking action against Russia for hacking committed against political organizations prior to the U.S. election in November, as well as other alleged actions against American diplomats. As part of this, the State Department is expelling 35 Russian diplomats and issuing sanctions on a number of Russian nationals. Among them are 2 men who were already on the FBI's most wanted list. Let's see if we can pronounce these names. I think this is like Evgeny. They're changing the spelling of the. I think this for Russians they used to spell it Yevgeny, like with a Y, but now it's Ev with an E. Evgeny. Evgeny. Evgeny Bogachev or Bogachev. How would we say it? Bogachev. Russians, help me out. He's wanted for a number of charges, including conspiracy, bank fraud, wire fraud, computer fraud, obviously, money laundering, and identity theft. So he's just a straight-up hacker, but he's here in the United States either as a diplomat or, I don't know, I mean, he gets himself on a list of State Department PNG, to use the Culo term that we were borrowing there, from John Schindler. But he's what the hell? Is basically my question. And he's on the FBI's most wanted list. Now, he's indicted under an online nickname in 2012 and again under his real name in 2014. There is a reward of up to $3 million for information leading to his arrest. Alexei Balan is wanted for computer intrusion, aggravated identity theft. I'm so aggravated by identity theft, I can't even tell you. And fraud in connection with a computer. All right. Did we just call that one? Because when it was Evgeny's turn, he was wanted for computer fraud. But Alexei is wanted on the closely related but not identical, I guess, charge of fraud in connection with a computer. The computer fired the bullet through some drywall, not me. I had nothing to do with it. What? All right. Maybe it's just a writing glitch. Anyway, federal warrants were issued for Alexei in June of 2012 and September of 2013, and the FBI is offering up to $100,000 for information leading to his arrest. Okay. So here they are with the wanted posters and everything. They look like pretty, whatever. They're regular Russian geek dudes. What the hell's going on here? I'm not really sure. Let's see. Evgeny appears to be a little bit older. Alexei is a younger guy. What's it say? Born in 1987 for Alexei. So what does that make him? In his mid to late 30s. Yeah, so 39. I'll be 38 now, 39 next year. Do I have that math off the top of my head right? Anyway, Here's my question. What the hell's going on here? First of all, what are these guys doing here? Is it alleged? Are they diplomats or not? There's a little note at the bottom that says, a correction note. An earlier version of this article misidentified the men as among the diplomats and not the Russian nationals on the sanctions list. So I'm unclear as to whether are there 35 diplomats plus some other Russian nationals being expelled, or is it a total of 35 people being expelled, not all of whom are diplomats? And here's my thing. I mean, I don't really want to get too critical of President Obama at the moment because I have no idea what you do about this hacking. I have no suggestions for it, so I'm not in a position to criticize what the president has done here. But I have this question. If the sanctions chiefly are okay, that's it, we're expelling these Russian nationals. First of all, does Russia care whether we expel Yevgeny Bogachev and Alexei Belon if they're private citizens? I mean, they might care because they're using them for, as hackers. So they're like, well, that's sad for us. Our hacking assets are being expelled from the United States. Although, again, first, I mean, there has to be more to this story. I got to know more about how these guys operate in order to be able to evaluate this, and maybe I'll just never have that information. But does it matter if you're talking about guys who are hackers, chiefly, criminal hackers at that? Does it matter? We're going to move them out of the United States and put them somewhere else. Send them back to Russia. Fine. Haven't we just figured out that you can be hacked from Russia just as easily as you can be from inside the United States? Or am I wrong about that? And secondly, if these two guys are on the FBI's most wanted list, well, one, where's the FBI? They find out that two of the people, I guess, maybe they're not connected to the hacks that we're talking about when we're speaking of the things that took place in the election context. Maybe they're just superfluous Russian hackers that we've wanted to get rid of for a long time, and we're just using this as an excuse and throwing them in there with them. Maybe they're government connected, maybe they're not, but they still may have had nothing to do with the election hacking. I don't know. That is a possibility. But if the FBI finds out, okay, the Russians are hacking all sorts of things prior to the election, and we know this, and that's what's alleged. But they kept quiet about that until after the election. But they made sure to make an announcement with regard to Hillary Clinton and her non-case that they pretended was being reopened, etc., in the last 11 days before the election, bringing back all the Comey complaints. You're all obviously familiar enough with all those. And in the midst of all this, in the midst of finding out that the election was being undermined, that governmental systems and private political party systems were being hacked by Russians, maybe including these two guys who were already on the FBI's most wanted list, you would think, now that's fodder for an FBI press conference. So you might say we don't want to jeopardize an ongoing investigation, perhaps, but I find it pretty amazing that they find the time and make the decision. Yeah, it would be a fine thing for us to issue this about Hillary Clinton, but let's not mention that two guys who are already on our most wanted list for hacking are possibly involved in hacking the American election, or at least, the situation surrounding the American election. Nothing on that one. But I guess the bigger point here, now the one that really worries me is, okay, so they're on the PNG list. They're going to be expelled from the country. Great. So I assume that we're going to get a report at some point like, yep, we're done. We got all 35 of them out. Here's pictures of them boarding planes and getting their butts kicked right out of America, right? These two guys are on the most wanted list. One guy has a $3 million reward out for him, and the other guy has only $100,000 out for him. But okay, $3.1 million payday would be a pretty good haul for anybody. How am I going to get some kind of verified notice that Evgeny and Alexei have both been effectively expelled from the United States? How do I know the sanctions have been imposed if these two nudniks are on the FBI's most wanted list? The FBI's most wanted list, in case you didn't put the picture together entirely in your own head, it's a list of people that they would really love to get their hands on but don't know where they are and so can't arrest them. How am I going to know? I mean, if Evgeny and Alexei show up at an airport, are we going to let them get on a plane or are we going to arrest them? And what would they prefer? Quite frankly, if you're met at or escorted to the plane by the FBI, you imagine you're on the FBI's most wanted list and they're bringing you to a plane home? Bye. Have a nice flight. You need a couple of bucks for, drinks in flight or renting headset or something? Or maybe you could just hack that? Hold on. I go hack ATM machine. I don't know whether they have those kind of accents either. It's very bigoted of me. But they are persona non grata, so maybe it's okay. But do you not see that this is ridiculous? How are we going to know if these two guys who have remained fugitives from the FBI have been expelled? And if they are expelled, why did we expel them? Why didn't we arrest them? Well, we're expelling them because, sanctions or whatever. Well, if they're not diplomats, then arrest them. And if they are diplomats, then why isn't it a bigger deal that there are diplomats who are wanted for bank fraud and computer fraud and fraud in connection with the computer? And I don't know what kind of relations they might have had with their computers, and we want to arrest them for that. This just seems incompatible to me with either diplomatic status or expulsion. I don't know. So I'm a little worried about it. Am I going to find out that this guy was never expelled, these two? I got no idea. So, okay, I'm a little bit worried about the efficacy of these sanctions, I must admit. It's not necessarily President Obama's fault, but I worry about these things. Okay, what else can we sneak in here before we wind things up for the day? Oh, and it occurs to me, I don't have specific word from Josie today about whether or not she'll be available, and I neglected to remind her to let me know if she felt like dropping by. The door's open, though, Josie. If you happen to be listening, certainly we'd welcome you in at any point, and I should probably fire off an email to her to see whether she'd like to come by or not. You know what? As a matter of fact, what I can do then, let's go back to our reserve of listener contributions. We have two, and we might as well clear out the queue, so to speak, before we wind up for the year. Let's see. Oh, I mentioned to you the other day that I've got one from Brian Monroe on, he's, of course, Canadian. You wouldn't necessarily guess that from the name. There's nothing inherently Canadian about it, but I've mentioned it before, as you know. But on their views toward their healthcare system and how they differ, I guess, on their views on it from the way Trump portrays it or portrayed it during the election. I also have John R.'s contribution from during the campaign when we all knew all about it, of course, but it sort of faded from view. The Texas then Attorney General's interest in waiving or ending the investigation into Trump University. Of course, that civil case now settled, but just as a reminder, even if we don't get to the segment, that's still sort of hanging out there. We never really did resolve what Pam Bondi was up to, but it doesn't matter because she's now working in the transition office. And we never really were able to hold to account Greg Abbott for his role in dismissing the investigation in Texas. Just a small reminder, at least, that that's out there. Let's roll, though, Brian Monroe's contribution and give me a chance to see if Josie is interested in coming on for segment 2. Take it away, Brian.
Good morning, David. This is your friendly Canadian correspondent for Daily Coast Radio, Brian Monroe, reporting on an article that I found here in Canada that I thought might be of value to your show and your listeners, and it is related to healthcare, both Canadian and U.S. healthcare. So I thought I'd introduce it. The article is from the Globe and Mail, which is a national newspaper for those of you that aren't aware of it. It was written by someone named Gloria Galloway, and it was published on November 14th. The article is called "Canadians Differ from Trump on View of Public Health Care," polls show. Americans have elected a president who calls Canadian health care, quote-unquote, catastrophic, but a new poll suggests the majority of people in this country want the public system expanded and that they are willing to pay more taxes to make that happen. So a little editorial here. Yes, we are actually willing to spend more money on our health care in order to expand some of the services that we do get today. Nearly 60% of respondents to a Nanos research survey conducted late last month for the Globe and Mail said that they would be willing to see their personal income taxes increased if the public system would pay for in-home caregivers, financial support for families caring for loved ones, and palliative support for life-threatening illnesses. Just 38% of those surveyed said that they would oppose tax hikes for those purposes. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump promised during the campaign that one of the first things that he would do when he gets to the Oval Office is repeal Obamacare, the act that greatly increased the number of Americans who have health care insurance. He has softened his position since then, saying that he would keep some parts of Obamacare intact. During the election debate, Mr. Trump derided Canada's universal system, calling it flawed and catastrophic in certain ways. But the Nanos poll suggests Canadians want more of it. A majority of people surveyed in every region of the country said that they would agree to tax hikes in exchange for more services being placed under the rubric of publicly funded care. That ranged from a high of 70% in favor in British Columbia to a low of 53.6% in favor on the prairies. Slightly less enthusiastic results were obtained when the pollsters asked if Canadians would accept greater federal debt loads for more health-related services. Roughly 55% of respondents supported or somewhat supported that proposition, while 43% were opposed or somewhat opposed. The U.S. presidential election was not only the triumph of Trump, but also the demonization of Obamacare, which sought to extend health care coverage to Americans, said Nick Nanos, the president of the polling firm. This suggests that there is still a gulf between Canadians and American opinion on health care. The telephone poll of 1,000 randomly sampled Canadians was conducted between October 27th and 30th, a week after federal health care minister Jane Philpott and her provincial and territorial counterparts came to a stalemate in discussions around how much money is needed to sustain the existing system. It is expected to accurately reflect the opinions of Canadians at large within 3.1 percentage points, 19 times out of 20. Antonia Mayoni, a political science professor at McGill University in Montreal, who has written extensively about healthcare, said Wednesday that she and her colleagues recently conducted their own poll about Canadian and American attitudes on healthcare. It found that there is much more polarization in the U.S. than in Canada around the issue of public funding. And that split is explained by ideology in the form of partisanship. And that is what we saw play out last night in the United States, Professor Mayoni said. People who identify as Democrats tend to support public health care, and people who identify as Republican largely do not, she said. In Canada, however, while people do have differences of opinion, Professor Mayoni said, they are not as evenly split and they are not as polarized around partisan identification. The Nanos poll also suggested that nearly 4 out of 5 Canadians do not agree with the federal government's plan to cut annual health care transfers to provinces and territories from 6% to a minimum of 3% starting next year. 61% of those surveyed said they're opposed such cuts, and another 17% were somewhat opposed. But while 44% of respondents said that they supported or somewhat supported letters written by the premiers to Mr. Trudeau suggesting that provincial cooperation on his plans to tackle climate change would be tied to a better deal on health funding, an equal percentage said that they oppose or somewhat oppose the tactic. And just to editorialize, what they're referring to there is the idea of a carbon tax. So that's what they're referring to there, and tying a better healthcare deal with each province. Adrienne Silnicki, the national coordinator for the Canadian Healthcare Coalition, an advocacy group for public health care, said she knows Canadians strongly support the current system, but it was great to see the widespread willingness to pay higher taxes to expand it. Many Canadians are already paying out of their own pockets for home care services and care for aging family members, said Ms. Silnicki. So the idea that they would be willing to increase their personal taxes or increase money going into the public health care system to cover those services makes complete sense. So, it's a real fallacy that the Canadian system is a disaster, as Donald Trump has referred to it. Most Canadians really like the healthcare system. It's completely false that Canadians cross the border in order to get urgent health care. The amount of times that happens is extremely minimal. They think that our healthcare system is expensive as well. And while the average cost of healthcare for your average Canadian is roughly about $4,000 a year, my understanding that the cost is roughly about $8,000 a year per American, because you have a healthcare system that is driven by profit and not by the needs of the people. So anyway, that was my contribution. I hope that people find that of value. I'm a little disappointed that Colorado were not able to pass that bill to get state-driven health care in their state. It's really a shame. Obviously, there were a lot of lobbyists there to make sure that that didn't happen, and create all kinds of FUD to make sure. But anyway, this is Brian Monroe from Canada, signing off. Back to you, David.
Thanks very much, Brian. Yeah, it's made for an interesting listen for me. It's funny, the thought that occurred to me, not only obviously the point you were trying to make about the differences between Canadian and American attitudes toward funding a national health care program, and how Trump and other politicians well before him tended to mislead Americans about what was really going on right next door, for God's sake, in Canada with their own healthcare system. It just occurred to me during your reading and discussion of it that it's funny. I was listening to the way you described, and the article described, the differences of opinion among Canadians about it, and how, though that difference of opinion obviously existed, there was nothing like the linkage with partisanship that we have in our country with regard to how we regard our own healthcare system. And I found that kind of fascinating, and frankly, like a little bit. Well, my first thought was, geez, that seems so almost quaint and old-fashioned. Like, and it's not that there's anything advanced or evolved at all. It's in fact quite the opposite. about American polarization on all subjects, but particularly around healthcare. But it struck me quaint and antiquated, like in the best possible sense. Those are some loaded words, obviously. So it's not easy to see what I'm getting at here. But what I am getting at, if I can explain myself finally, isn't that the sort of political understanding from what we would maybe think of nostalgically as a simpler time here in America, when people disagreed, but they weren't disagreeable, and we could all have a debate and then go have a drink afterwards, etc. In other words, is that not exactly the kind of nostalgic American memory that Donald Trump keeps saying he's striving for? How interesting that was to me, just to think about that. I mean, maybe it's misrepresenting Trump's actual position, but to the extent that he's really pining for this, whether it existed or not, this past in America that no longer exists, I think that it probably was a lot more politically. It seems like it was a lot more like this simplified version anyway of what we're hearing about in Canada now. There's the lack of polarization. There was certainly an ideological divide, but it was not nearly so sharp, and it didn't define people's lives or their political positions. It's but just another one of those sort of crazy contradictions that exists in Trump's brain, and that Gimmitarians can get along with. I pine for the old days when there wasn't this sharp partisanship, and I pine for it so much that I just have to tell you how much you suck for not pining for it. Okay, turns on a dime. That's fine. Okay, well, let's see. That has given us an opportunity, at any rate, to catch up on things, up northern way. We might want to see if we can't squeeze in the bit. I should check on the time that it takes to run the article here. John's contribution likewise runs about 7.5 minutes. I'm not certain I can get all the way through it and still update everybody on everything. Maybe I'll save that one in pocket. I'm sorry, John. This seems to happen to you quite often. He's sent me so many entries. Although at one point, one of them was a tremendous piece that you know how we are about long reads here. I feel funny about having held this one in reserve, but it ran about 17 minutes, and I felt like, gosh, that's an awful long time to just sort of turn off the mics and be away. And so I didn't cue that one, although we do the long read, long rants, get lost in a story thing all the time here. Somehow, as live radio, I don't know, I feel like I'm slacking if I turn it over for 17 minutes and things like that. But I apologize to those of you who may have sent things in the past that we didn't get to. I know, let's see, Darwin, did we catch up with your piece? I think we just at least mentioned that you had sent a piece and I had sat on it for too long, but sometimes it feels like there's no time to shoehorn things in, even as I waste all kinds of time on things like this and other stories along the way. Anyway, we'll push on here. I did hear from Josie. It sounds like, I'll call in to say hi if you like, but there's literally nothing going on. It is kind of a quiet week. And so, there's no need to trouble yourself unless you feel like, if you feel like calling in with New Year's wishes, that would be fine. But, it's kind of a quiet week, and, We'll wait on it again, although we miss hearing from you, certainly, Josie. So hopefully there'll be more news, and hopefully there'll be some good news we can mix in with things like this. All right, let's see. Being that it is the end of the week and the end of the year, I feel like we need to shoehorn in a couple more stories for you to be armed with for the weekend. It's a big social weekend. And Monday... We'll be. There's no chance, I don't think, of putting together a live show for Monday. It's not that we'll be all hungover or anything, but everybody's going to be home the day off. It's a big holiday. Everybody wants to hang out and have a relaxing morning. There is an awful lot of information out there, though. I can't rule out a fresh podcast, but I can rule out a live show for you at any rate. But there's plenty to catch up with. We'll be back on the air live on Tuesday for our first show of the new year, and everything is likely to have been stood on its head by that point. But here's what we got for squeezing in for your consideration over the weekend. First of all, just to put this on your radar, we have a piece from Raw Story. Travis Getty is writing this one up. Evangelicals slam Trump for inviting prosperity gospel heretic Paula White to pray at inauguration. As you know, he's having a difficult time lining up his big names and celebrities for his inauguration. But you always like to have a couple of religious figures around to do a little bit of praying because of the separation of church and state that we love to have here. And apparently he's invited a preacher who's got a bit of controversy behind her. I never heard of Paula White, but others have, and they don't like her very much. And I was surprised because prosperity gospel, we paint with a broad brush here all the time, and it's a mistake, and you shouldn't do it. Avoid it, kids. Stay in school. But we talk about the prosperity gospel here as though it were something that had universal acceptance on the conservative Republican circles, and I guess that it does not. So who's Paula White? We probably could have saved this story for closer to the inauguration, but we want to put it on your radar early so that you can sound smart. When it comes up, you'll say, I know exactly who you're talking about. Many conservative Christians are angry over Donald Trump's selection of a prosperity gospel televangelist to pray at his inauguration. Kind of would have put all televangelists in the prosperity gospel category, but maybe I'm wrong. Paula White, senior pastor of New Destiny Christian Center, will join Franklin Graham, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Rabbi Marvin Hier, H-I-E-R, and other religious leaders in the January 20th inauguration, but her participation has proved controversial, reported the Washington Examiner, which is, of course, the wacko right-wing newspaper here in D.C. Some of the other local examiners are not quite as bonkers, but the D.C. one is pretty nutty. Paula White's picture illustrates the piece, by the way. She appears to be a perky blonde lady. I say that not because she's blonde and so therefore they're all perky, but this is a very quirky picture of her. And because it's quirky, it makes me think perky. And she's got her arms up in the air and I don't know. Whatever, she looks, well, I'll tell you this, she doesn't present the traditional picture of a pastor, not just because of her gender. We'll say it that way. Does that make any sense for you? All right. Anyway, here's what they have to say by way of complaints about Paula White. And we're relying here on Eric Erickson, okay? So that'll give you some idea of where this comes from. Anyway, he says, I'd rather a Hindu pray on Inauguration Day and not risk the souls of men than one whose heresy lures in souls with promises of comfort only to damn them in eternity, wrote Eric Erickson. Eric Erickson, as you may have noticed, has become considerably more religious in his theming, in his writing. I think he actually just relatively recently had some kind of personal health crisis, and maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe he was always this religious and I just never noticed it, and the ones who reached my ears were mostly political in their focus. Anyway, he seems to have taken on a more overt religiosity here, and he hasn't, in my opinion, as a non-Christian, doesn't really appear to have brought him any closer to Jesus here. I'd rather a Hindu pray. Really? I mean, okay. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't a Hindu pray on Inauguration Day? To be honest, Hindus ought to be praying about every day now that Trump's on his way into office here. All right. Anyway, at least, he then goes on to say, at least no one would mistake a Hindu, a Buddhist, or an atheist. He's being super careful not to say Muslim here, too. With being a representative of Christ's kingdom. He's super religious all of a sudden. White and her Florida church have been investigated by the U.S. Senate for operating a scam, actually investigated, based on the prosperity gospel's defining principle that followers who donate money, or a seed, to the church will see their investment returned many times over. Paula White is a charlatan and recognized as a heretic by every Orthodox Christian of whatever tribe, said Russell Moore of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and an outspoken Trump critic. I'm not too upset that these people are having a very difficult time getting along with this selection. These are not people I typically care a great deal about. But I don't know. I find it somewhat interesting, the terms in which they are condemning her. I wasn't really expecting that, especially since the same terms could be turned around on most of them fairly easily. Now, White, who is the third wife of Journey keyboardist Jonathan Cain, that's an interesting twist too, and Cain is also her third spouse, by the way, takes in up to $80,000 a week, according to a 2007 report by the Tampa Tribune, and owns multi-million-dollar homes in Trump Tower, and Florida. Paula White has a long history of bankruptcies, failed business ventures, and unsuccessful marriages, which makes her the perfect choice to deliver a prayer on behalf of a president-elect who has proudly proclaimed that he's never felt the need to ask forgiveness for God from anything, wrote Paula Bolliard, a conservative Christian blogger for PJ Media. Again, usually sources I'm just not willing to credit in any other context. It's just a story about conservatives who are mad at Donald Trump. Erickson was particularly troubled in a video which he posted that shows White speaking to a man who says he's a son of God and that Jesus Christ was, quote, not the only begotten Son of God, to which the pastor agreed, he's the first fruit. Paula White is a Trinity-denying heretic, Erickson wrote. She rejects the Council of Nicaea's creed that every Christian accepts. To reject the orthodoxy of the Nicene Creed is to reject Christianity itself. Maybe, sure, why not? I'll certainly let you speak for yourselves on that score, but it's pretty weird, I must say. And just, again, God damn, Trump Tower. That's why I started off the section on the Russian sanctions, reminding everybody that place is packed to the rafters with nuts. I can't believe. Not only is that it's just additionally an insane aspect of the Trump presidency all by itself. He holes himself up in the Mos Eisley of condominium units in Manhattan. It's nuts. The place is full of whack jobs, top to bottom. I don't know if there's anyone normal who lives in the place. Honestly, I have no idea. But I'm in the middle of all this nonsense about sanctions against Russians. I have no idea how many of them are living in Trump Tower right now. There are Russian mobsters on the approved list for the Secret Service. The Secret Service is guarding the homes of corrupt Russian mobsters because they cohabitate with Donald Trump in the same address, the same building. Yes, they don't live in the same apartment as far as I know, but I don't know. There's also weird servers that communicate with Russian banks in Trump Tower. I don't know. And nobody knows how they got there. It's a weird situation. It makes me feel weird for bringing it up because, once again, I'm back to the Russia thing, but Trump Tower, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that place, they should just lock the whole thing. They should just seal it with cement and just be like, that's it. We want to clean up crime in this country at a major level? Yeah. Just put bars on the windows and cement the doors shut and be done with it. You can drop food on the roof if you feel humanitarian about it. Okay, what else do we need to let you know about before we wind up for the day? Let's see. Yes, we didn't mention this one, but it's you've seen it already, but we have to kind of acknowledge that it's out there. There is the story that Donald Trump is out there claiming credit for job creation, which once again he had absolutely nothing to do with. He's out saying that Sprint is going to, as he puts it, bring back 5,000 jobs into the United States. Not really certain exactly what that's supposed to mean, but certainly the job creation thing is what he wants to take credit for. Oliver Willis, I think, summed it up nicely enough in his own blog. He did so with an eye toward collecting the outlets, the news outlets that were repeating Trump's lie about having somehow had a role in the creation of these 5,000 new jobs, just so you didn't lose track of who was swallowing the bait when he put it out there. Donald Trump, he writes, did not get Sprint to bring 5,000 jobs back to the United States. Sprint announced the plan to hire 5,000 people in April of 2015. And its parent company, SoftBank, that's the Japanese bank, right, that he recently was trying to announce deals with, has had plans for jobs in the United States for months, long before Trump won. In fact, goes back to before Trump actually announced his candidacy, right, April of 2015. Trump tried to take credit for this announcement as something that happened after he won the 2016 presidential election. Many news organizations repeated his absolute lie in their headlines without checking the facts of his claim and or pointing out the lie in their headlines. Here they are. New York Times headline on this story was, Trump takes credit for Sprint plan to add 5,000 jobs in U.S. No doubt those guys thought they had differentiated between his claims and the reality by saying Trump takes credit for. But you could say Trump falsely takes credit for, or Trump takes credit he's not due for Sprint plan. But okay, I know you got to keep your headlines short. USA Today's headline was Trump, Sprint moving 5,000 jobs back to U.S. And again, see, I'm sure that at USA Today they were like, well, Trump said that. That's true. CNN Trump declares victory. Sprint will create 5,000 jobs, 5,000 U.S. jobs. That, I think, probably a little worse than most. CNBC's headline, Trump says Sprint will bring 5,000 jobs back to U.S. OneWeb will create 3,000 jobs. Wall Street Journal says Trump says Sprint bringing 5,000 jobs back to U.S. It's all pretty much the same. I don't know if there's any that are particularly egregious. But, I guess the point is, I'm sure that the publications thought they were being somewhat responsible by just making it a Trump claim, but this guy is a little bit different, and you're going to have to differentiate between him and the rest of the existing world of politicians, and check out whether the claim merits making before you decide on how to run your headline. So a good point, I think. Something to keep an eye on. You've all likely heard the stories, and you all have had the same complaints. I just want to kind of acknowledge those and get those on the record. If you have fallen behind during the holiday period, pick up the paper, pick up Oliver's summation of things, and you'll be ready to go for this big social weekend. What else? I just want to note the fact that something ran over on the front page over at Daily Kos that jives pretty well with what we discussed the other day. That is Carrie Elleveld's piece from Wednesday. Experts say Paul Ryan's crackdown on live streaming from the House floor is unconstitutional. Not for exactly the same reasons that I brought up in speculating on it off the cuff, but it jives with the theme. The unconstitutionality of it, though, is based essentially on one, the reservation of powers to the House to punish its members for disorderly behavior, as opposed to Ryan's proposal, which would delegate that responsibility and that power to the Speaker's office and the Ethics Committee. It says here, where are they borrowing this from? Politico. Politico's Rachel Bade writing, experts say Ryan's proposal may run afoul of the Article 1 reservation of power here that says each house may punish its own members for disorderly behavior. For more than 200 years, that has been interpreted to mean any contested sanctions against lawmakers must be approved by the full House with a floor vote. Attorneys steeped in congressional legal matters say the Constitution gives the House the authority to discipline members. I've never heard of anything where an officer of the House was given that authority, said Mike Stern, a former lawyer for the nonpartisan House Counsel's Office and the Senate Homeland Security Committee's GOP staff. Stern, who called the proposed rule a plausible constitutional issue to raise, said Democrats could take the matter to court. Their strongest argument could be the House doesn't have the authority to give these officers the power to punish us. Only the power of the House can do that, and Republicans have short-circuited our rights by the way they've done it. And I think a good point. So one well worth considering as well. Let's see. I don't recall. Oh, yes. So the summation of it was that Ryan and other Republicans wanted to enable the sergeant at arms to do the penalizing. We penalize House members with fines up to $2,500 for taking video or pictures on the chamber floor. Yeah, strictly speaking, that's probably right. The sergeant at arms could maybe refer the case to the House, but the House ought to be the one to make the decision. Just another angle and a very good one, and an important, nuanced one to add to our discussion of their idea of sanctions. Other things that we ought to touch on before wrapping up for the day, and we still have a little bit of time left here to do that. Let's see. Another sort of odd angle on Trump to keep an eye on for the future. This also from the Washington Post from a couple of days ago. Simon Denyer, the writer on this one, just double checking. And, oh, by the way, just updating you on the Washington Post subscription situation. I just realized that probably far better for tax purposes to buy that subscription before New Year's Eve. And then that way it can be included in, I think you can make your nice deduction for that if you're subscribing for business purposes, and we are ostensibly doing that right now. Probably shouldn't be discussing this at this point, but because it's a pending matter, right? But don't we do better? I don't know. I'll have to ask my stepdad on that one. He's the accountant. Any accountants in there that can tell me whether that's? I guess if it's a subscription going forward, like I'm subscribing, I'm not going to be able to use the subscription in 2016. But do I deduct it now? I don't know. Well, I'll leave it up to the accountants. At any rate, I guess it won't make a great deal of difference. But maybe it's one more good reason to get the thing out of the way early. That way also I can say, not only have I made my New Year's resolution, I have also kept it. So that gets that out of the way. Anyway, Washington Post piece here, to which I do not yet subscribe. Trump hotels had its eye on China, as he likes to say, but the door hasn't opened. This is interesting. As we know, we've been following his emoluments problems and the entanglements he has with governments around the world, and how he's leaning on governments around the world to make to grease the skids for his company's development plans and partnerships all over the world. He's railed on China all along, and then of course we had the weird incident, which then turned out to be allegedly was actually a premeditated incident, as between Trump and the Taiwanese government and China. This is just a different, interesting angle on all this. And again, for a guy, another story that gives us insight about the guy who rails about China. And secretly, all along, he really has just been looking to find a way to squeeze some dollars out of China. And I guess he's not made any headway, and so therefore he hates China. So the moment that reverses, does that mean China's awesome too, in the same way that Russia is? I don't know. But I thought we better put this on the radar just in case. So once again, Trump Hotels has had its eye on China, but the door hasn't opened. Donald Trump calls China an enemy, quote unquote, enemy of the United States, a threat and an international pariah whose modus operandi is to lie, cheat, and steal. That's interesting. That doesn't make them an ally from his point of view, but anyway, but for at least 8 years, his hotel chain has been trying to do business here. It is a story datelined in Beijing, by the way. Although negotiations have yet to bear fruit, Trump Hotels has made confident predictions this year about opening 20 or 30 luxury hotels in China. It is an ambition that would involve the company in direct negotiations with a communist party that the president-elect professes to fundamentally distrust. On December 12th, Trump tweeted that he would do, quote, no new deals, unquote, during his time in the White House. It is not clear what that means for Trump Hotels as a company, and both the Trump Organization and the Trump Transition Team declined to comment for this article. Editorially, I would not be surprised if he were to do a deal in China and then claim that wasn't a new deal because it was something that had been in the works for many years. I expect fully that we will see several such deals made, and only the first time will it be controversial. Trump will offer up that this is a deal we've been working on negotiating for 10 years, and it finally came to fruition. That's not a new deal. And we'll argue about that, eventually swallow that, and then as each new deal is announced, eventually let the whole thing fall by the wayside. That's my guess. So, if Trump Hotels goes ahead with its efforts to expand to China, or even if it only lays plans to do so after his term in office, it could hugely complicate one of the most important foreign policy relationships Trump will have to negotiate during his presidency. And again, I have to pause here now to say that's an excellent point. Also, Trump could make the deal, all but seal the deal and then simply say it won't be implemented until after my time in office. But if it'll be a private deal and we'll never end up seeing the terms. He could very easily be taking payments sort of as an options deal or a placeholder. We will go ahead with this deal pending, the vetting of the whole thing, and then of course waiting until after I'm out of office. And he could be receiving payments the whole time, and then once out of office, fine, boom, go build the hotel, and then say, see, I waited until afterwards, but the cash is already there. We'll never know. That's likely the point. Anyway, the suspicion that Trump as president might be trying to badger China or butter it up to promote his business there risks coloring perceptions of his every move in regard to Beijing, even those that are completely above board. It's very hard for foreign politicians to do business in China, said Liu Zhuemei. I've got no idea how I'm going to pronounce some of these Chinese names. X-U-E, Zhuemei, or Mai, M-E-I, Zhuemei. Sorry. Anyway, he is the vice president of New World Development's Huamei Real Estate Development. Holy mackerel. Why did I dive into a China article at this point? If you want to do politics, don't try doing business in China, is the advice. Liu said it isn't hard to throw up a building in China. It sounds uncomfortable, though. It isn't hard to throw up a building in China. The difficulty lies in all the procedures involved in buying land and getting permission to build on it. That seems like it's the same everywhere, but I could see it being harder in China. It's a lot of trouble. Oh, and I've made this mistake. It's a lot of trouble, she said. I apparently have no ability to differentiate between masculine and feminine names, if there even is a difference, in Chinese. I assume there's a difference. I just don't know what it is. Well, anyway, I'm sorry to Ms. Liu Zhuemei, however that's pronounced. I've wrecked your name again, and I've missed your gender. Anyway, it's a lot of trouble, she said. Good job. If your relationship with China isn't good, there's no way your papers and permits will be approved. The Chinese government is hard to deal with, so buildings are hard to build. The complications for Trump of mixing business and politics were thrown into sharp relief December 2nd, when he accepted a congratulatory phone call from Taiwan's president, Tsai Ing-wen, a move that infuriated the Chinese government in Beijing, eventually, and overturned decades of diplomatic protocol. I had to add eventually there because, of course, we've had that thrown into question from reporting from Taiwan, that apparently Beijing was not necessarily initially that incensed, but perhaps American media's anger at Trump prompted Beijing to take umbrage. Anyway, continuing with the article here, a representative of the Trump Organization made a business trip to Taiwan in October, according to media reports linked to the woman's Facebook page. October. I didn't even realize it was that recent. And the Taiwan News and other media outlets reported last month that someone professing to represent the company had held talks with the mayor of Taoyuan in September about an airport development project. The Trump Organization said after Trump's phone call with Tsai that it had no plans for expansion in Taiwan and that there had been no authorized visits to push for a development project. Trump's business interests up to now have pointed in other directions, with the money to be made in mainland China dwarfing any potential business deals with Taiwan. Trump's interest in China dates to late 2005. See, he won't consider it a new deal. When he began applying for trademarks there for the Trump brand for a variety of businesses, including hotels and real estate. Even that was hard, and it took him a decade to get his name trademarked for hotel and real estate services, a victory he won about the time of the presidential election. Dun-dun-dun. Amazing, isn't that? In 2008, Trump Hotels was reported by the South China Morning Post to have joined forces with one of China's largest property developers, Evergrande Real Estate, and that has an E on the end, Evergrande Real Estate, and the Hong Kong-based Orient Property Group to bid on the development of a landmark office tower in the southern city of Guangzhou. The deal fell apart a month later when Evergrande pulled out, according to NPR. But once again, I just want to note, remember here that what we just learned in the previous paragraph, Trump started in 2005 looking to trademark his Trump brand name for his businesses, and that case languished for 10 years, and then, about the time of the presidential election, poof, it came through. This much we expect, I guess, from the Chinese government. Trump will portray that as just, hey, it's the result of a decade of hard work. That's all. In 2012, and I guess in a way it is, in 2012, the Trump Hotel Collection opened an office in Shanghai with 10 employees. It's first in Asia. The Trump development team has identified Greater China as our top priority among high-potential emerging markets. Todd G. Win Parry, a senior vice president of global hotel development and acquisitions, said in a news release the following year, while chief operating officer Jim Petrus said the group aimed to open 30 hotels by 2020. Interesting that they refer to it as the Greater China. The term Greater China usually refers to mainland China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, you see. Just before the U.S. election in October, Trump Hotels chief executive Eric Danziger was quoted in Chinese news media as telling an Asia-Pacific hospitality conference in Hong Kong that the group was still aiming to open Trump hotels in 20 to 30 cities in China and Scion hotels in more cities, but this time without referring to a specific target date. So look out, keep an eye open for the Scion hotels as well. There will definitely be Trump hotels in big Chinese cities like Beijing and Shanghai, he was quoted as saying. They are big cities, of course, but they are also likely the only city names in China that he had readily at hand. But if Danziger is right, those projects could either fall apart or become a liability if Trump doesn't keep the U.S.-China relationship on an even keel. State-owned real estate companies play a big role in the Chinese real estate industry, and private firms also take their cues from government hints, said Liao Jun, vice president of Vanke Oriental Properties. If U.S.-China relations go bad, it will be impossible for him to hope to do business in China. And any Trump hotels that have been opened by that point would face serious pressures. This is probably the bigger of our emoluments or foreign entanglements concerns, that, as far as I can see. People with money and status in China care deeply about their reputation, Liu said. If China is engaged in a trade war or exchanging hostile words with Trump, you can forget about doing business in China after staying at a Trump hotel. They will watch. They will see who stays there. That is an interesting angle on things. Why has it proved so difficult for Trump hotels to get a foothold in China? For one thing, the Chinese luxury hotel market that Trump executives have been so eager to enter is enduring a downturn sparked by the government's campaign against corruption. According to real estate executives who track the market, he'll have a problem with that. Some hotels have even moved to shed their star ratings so officials can continue to stay at them, they say. Oh, interesting. So it's corrupt for government officials to be seen staying at 5-star hotels. The Trump brand is not a street name in China, said Daniel Voelm, a Hong Kong-based managing partner of HVS, a hotel industry consulting and research firm. To my knowledge, most of what he does is branding rather than actual development. Vanke's Liao agreed. I've been in the real estate market for decades, but I didn't know about Trump until I went to Las Vegas 2 years ago, and the tour guide pointed out a golden shining Trump hotel, he said. My understanding is that in terms of international brands, people trust hotels like Marriott and Sheraton more in China. They still think of Trump hotels as a bit sketchy and unheard of. Interesting. I know that'll hurt him deeply. But yeah, more to Armando's old point of him just really having been, to this point, a kind of a bit player, even when it comes to just real estate. Trump's brand may be better known in China now, but ethics advisors for past presidents say trading on his position, particularly with foreign partners or clients, would raise serious questions about conflicts of interest and possibly violations of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, barring gifts or profits from foreign leaders. Along with his No New Deals pledge, Trump has said that he'll put his business in the hands of his adult sons, Don Jr. and Eric. Trump Hotels also appears to have run into the practical problems of doing business here. In 2013, it signed a memorandum of understanding with State Grid Corporation of China, an electricity company, and the country's largest state-owned enterprise, for an urban complex in Beijing, including high-end hotels, serviced apartments, office space, and other commercial uses, according to a person close to the deal. That deal, for branding and management, was potentially worth between $100 million and $150 million over 15 years. Robbie Q, a former director of Trump's Greater China office, told the AFP news agency. But negotiations were put on hold after Chinese authorities opened a corruption investigation into State Grid, AFP reported. In a report issued in June 2015, China's National Audit Office accused the company of applying for a permit to build a research and development center on the land, not a commercial venture. There is no suggestion that Trump or his companies were implicated in the inquiry. State Grid declined to comment. At the site of the Guomao district, workers said building had continued until about 6 months ago and has since largely stopped. Trump has consistently berated China on Twitter. In his 2011 book, Time to Get Tough, he called China's leaders our enemy and accused them of ruining our way of life. We shouldn't entertain communists and beg for a few tiny contracts, he wrote. But of course, he'd be willing to beg for extremely huge contracts, no doubt. Anyway, there is a bit more to the article, but again, I just wanted to put on your radar the fact that, yes, just like with everywhere else, Donald Trump really is angling for business contracts in China, the avowed enemy, China. And the business deals, because of the nature of doing business in China and its government, you're basically going to have to always be walking on eggshells with those guys. And for somebody, for a government that he still is willing to hold out as a chief international enemy, it's going to be awfully difficult. Although, again, for Trump, he'd be perfectly comfortable being beholden to the Chinese government and then simply pointing to his willingness to agree to their new demands as a sign that he was fostering a détente, a peace between the two, not that he was using the relationship to shovel money into his own back pocket. And who doesn't like peace, right? Peace through profitability. I guess that's the kind of, that's constructive engagement from the old apartheid days, right? He's just making business propositions that'll bring the two countries back together. Okay, time to wind up and hand the microphones back to the guys at the after show who will do their own year-end show. And, of course, I left myself virtually no time to tell you about all the fantastic stories that they have ready to go. But I can tell you this, I see the Coke name being invoked here, too. So perk your ears up and stay tuned.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, that's right. I'll just tell you about this bit here. It says, after Obama designated new national monuments, Koch-backed GOP officials and armed secessionist militants have issued a call to saddle up. So we may be in for another round with the Bundys once again. Stay tuned to find out all the details on this and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice next. Happy New Year.